Chapter 1. The Ship That Remembered. The ship was old. Not broken, not abandoned, just old. The kind of old that made modern warships feel temporary. Commander Cyril had spent 32 years exploring the silent edges of mapped space. He had found frozen battlefields drifting between stars. He had discovered civilizations that had turned themselves into living crystal. He had once spent 6 months trapped inside the gravity well of a dead neutron star. Nothing had prepared him for this. The object floated where no ship should have survived. Dead space. A region beyond normal trade routes where even long-range probes rarely returned. The stars were distant here, their light thin and cold. Darkness did not simply surround the ship. It clung to it, as though the void itself refused to let go. His exploration cruiser, Silver Horizon, drifted carefully forward. No emissions, the sensor officer reported quietly. No engines. No reactor signature. No weapon locks. Cyril folded his hands behind his back. And yet, he said softly, it remains intact. No one answered. The bridge had become strangely quiet. The vessel ahead stretched nearly 4 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull carried scars older than most civilizations. Entire sections had been repaired with different metals over centuries. Some plates looked almost handmade. It should have been impossible. Ships that old did not exist. Not anymore. Magnify the bow. The image expanded across the bridge. There it was. A faded blue circle wrapped around a white star. The symbol had been scratched away in places. Time had nearly erased it. History had tried harder. Cyril felt his breath stop. Run identification. The computer hesitated. Then, no record found. A younger officer frowned. Probably some forgotten colony. The oldest historian aboard slowly stood from his console. His hands were shaking. No, he whispered. Cyril looked toward him. You recognize it. The old scholar swallowed before speaking. I've only seen it once. Where? In forbidden archives. Silence filled the bridge. The symbol belongs to humanity. Several officers exchanged amused glances. Humans, one navigator laughed. The bedtime stories. The extinct builders. The myths. The historian never smiled. Myths don't get erased from every archive in the galaxy. Nobody spoke after that. Cyril looked back toward the drifting giant. The stories had always been strange. Long ago, before the current empires rose, scattered records mentioned a species born on an unusually violent world. A race that survived impossible climates, predators, earthquakes, storms, diseases, and wars of its own making. Then, nothing. Every reliable record simply ended. As though someone had decided humanity should be forgotten. Not conquered. Forgotten. Commander. The communications officer looked confused. I'm receiving something. From the ship. Yes. But what? It shouldn't be possible. A faint burst of static echoed across the bridge. The sound was almost gentle, like an old radio waking after centuries. More static. Then breathing. Real breathing. Someone inhaled slowly. Someone exhaled. Every person on the bridge stood perfectly still. The voice that followed sounded tired. Old. Calm. Human. If you can hear this. The transmission crackled. Please tell me. A pause. Did we keep the promise? No one moved. No one even blinked. The transmission ended. The bridge remained frozen. Cyril realized his own hands were trembling. Not from fear. from the weight of hearing a voice that history insisted had vanished 3 centuries ago. He looked toward the stars beyond the viewport. Somewhere across the galaxy, entire universities taught that humans had never truly existed. Someone had lied. Hours later, docking clamps locked against the ancient vessel. The boarding team waited beside the airlock. 20 soldiers, 4 scientists, 1 historian, Commander Cyril. Weapons remained lowered. No one wanted to be the first person in centuries to point a gun at history. The outer hatch responded immediately. Too immediately. Heavy mechanisms groaned. Dust drifted through stale air. Then the door slowly opened. Warm air escaped. Not recycled. Fresh. It carried the unmistakable scent of growing plants. The scientists stared. Impossible. Cyril stepped through first. The corridor beyond was softly illuminated by yellow lights. Not bright. Comfortable. The walls bore scratches from generations of hands. Children's heights had been marked in fading ink. Tiny dates. Simple drawings. Flowers. Stars. Families. There were handwritten names everywhere. No military vessel should have looked like this. One scientist touched the wall carefully. Real paint, she whispered. Someone kept adding names. The historian read them aloud. Elena. Marcus. Lena. Jonah. Sam. Hundreds. Then thousands. Every corridor carried another generation. Every wall remembered another family. The ship was no museum. It had lived. Sarah walked slowly. A small wooden toy rested beneath one doorway. Hand-carved, worn smooth by tiny fingers. He picked it up. A little spaceship. Simple. Loved. He carefully placed it back exactly where he found it. Further inside, the corridor widened. The boarding team stopped. Before them stretched an enormous greenhouse. Trees. Real trees. Fruit hanging from branches. Children laughed somewhere beyond rows of vegetables. Birds. Actual birds. One landed briefly on a railing before flying away. Nobody aboard Silver Horizon spoke. The impossible continued unfolding. Families looked toward the newcomers with quiet curiosity. No panic. No fear. Just cautious interest. Children peeked from behind older adults. An elderly man waved politely before returning to watering tomatoes. Cyril almost forgot he stood aboard a vessel that had vanished for 300 years. This felt less like a ship, more like an entire town. A young girl approached him. She could not have been older than 8. She held a basket of apples. "You look hungry." Cyril blinked. She offered him one. He accepted carefully. "Thank you." She smiled. "My grandmother says visitors always arrive hungry." Before Cyril could answer, another voice echoed through the greenhouse. "Emma." The girl looked over. "I know." She smiled again before running away. Cyril followed her with his eyes. Standing beneath an enormous tree was a woman in a faded naval coat. The uniform had been repaired countless times. Every stitch was deliberate. Silver streaks crossed dark hair pulled neatly behind her head. She stood perfectly straight. Not because she had to. Because she had never stopped being a captain. Captain Mara Voss. She watched the visitors quietly. No guard stood beside her. No weapons. Just confidence earned over generations. Cyril stepped forward. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally she smiled. It was gentle. Tired. Strong. Her first words settled over everyone like gravity itself. You took longer than we hoped. Nobody answered. She continued. We kept the lights on anyway. Even the soldiers lowered their eyes. There was no accusation. Only relief. Cyril slowly bowed his head. My name is Commander Cyril. I know. Yous know. We've listened to the galaxy for 3 centuries. She looked around the greenhouse. We've had plenty of time. Cyril struggled to find words. You received our broadcasts. Every one. Why never answer? Her eyes drifted upward toward the artificial sky. Because the promise mattered more than loneliness. Before Cyril could ask what she meant, distant bells echoed through the ship. Not alarms. Gathering bells. Families quietly looked upward. Children stopped playing. No panic. Just routine. Mara noticed his concern. Don't worry. They're gathering for evening stories. Stories. So nobody forgets who they are. Across the galaxy, news of the discovery spread faster than any government could suppress. Within hours, emergency councils assembled. On the prosperous world of Verx Prime, representatives laughed openly. Humans. Their folklore. Some explorer found an antique colony ship. Nothing more. Financial markets barely reacted. News channels joked about romantic historians chasing ghosts. The discovery was dismissed before the meeting ended. Far away, inside the heavily fortified dominion of Rune. No one laughed. An elderly counselor quietly left the chamber after hearing the report. He entered a secure archive beneath the capital. No attendants followed. He unlocked a chamber sealed for over 200 years. Inside rested a single black box. His hands shook as he entered an ancient authorization code. A recording began. An old Rune admiral appeared. His uniform belonged to an era no one living remembered. His face carried exhaustion beyond words. If this recording has been opened. He paused. Someone has found humanity. The counselor's breathing quickened. The admiral continued. If they still live. Another pause. Pray they never discover why we erased them from history. The recording ended. The counselor closed the box. He whispered only 4 words. They survived the silence. Back aboard the ancient vessel, night settled across the artificial gardens. Children gathered around older storytellers beneath glowing lanterns. Soft music drifted through the leaves. Commander Cyril watched in silence. This was not a civilization clinging to life. It was one preserving something. Something precious. Something deliberate. Mara joined him. You expected ruins. Yes. You found a home. Yes. She smiled faintly. My grandmother planted those trees. She pointed toward the orchard. My great-grandmother built the classrooms. Another direction. My great-great-grandfather repaired the engines. She looked directly at him. 9 generations. Cyril whispered. You never stopped believing someone would come. We weren't waiting to be rescued. What were you waiting for? Her smile disappeared. For the day the galaxy became ready. Before Cyril could ask another question, a young technician hurried toward them. His face had gone pale. Captain. She turned immediately. What is it? The beacon. Her expression changed for the first time. Not fear. Recognition. It activated. Cyril frowned. I don't understand. The technician swallowed. It wasn't supposed to answer unless. He couldn't finish. Mara slowly looked toward the ceiling. Somewhere deep inside the ancient vessel, something enormous had awakened. Not machinery, not engines, something far older. A deep vibration rolled through the ship. Gentle, patient, alive. Every light flickered once. The historian beside Cyril suddenly gasped. The signal. What signal? He stared at his scanner. His voice barely escaped. It didn't come from this ship. Everyone froze. It came. He looked toward the stars beyond the hull. From thousands of different locations across the galaxy. End of Chapter 1, Chapter 2, The Lock Beneath the Stars, Part 1. The vibration did not stop. It spread. Not through the ship. Through space itself. Commander Cyril stared at the scanner in disbelief as hundreds of new signals continued appearing across the holographic star map. At first they blinked into existence one by one. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Within seconds, the display became crowded with identical markers. Every signal carried the same ancient identification code. Every signal had been silent for centuries. The young technician looked ready to faint. They were hidden. Another officer whispered. No. They were waiting. Captain Mara Voss never looked surprised. She simply closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if greeting an old friend she had always known would return. It has begun. Cyril turned toward her. What has begun? She opened her eyes. The part we prayed would never become necessary. Far beyond the forgotten colony ship, alarm sirens echoed through military headquarters across the galaxy. Observation stations lost track of ordinary traffic. Deep space telescopes suddenly detected impossible objects emerging from darkness, where nothing had existed only moments before. Ancient silhouettes. Massive. Silent. Watching. One observer counted over 300 vessels surrounding a dead star. Another discovered nearly 1,000 drifting inside the rings of an abandoned gas giant. A research station near the edge of known space transmitted only one sentence before every channel fell silent. They're everywhere. On the bridge of the Dominion flagship Iron Resolve, Commander Cale Riss stood motionless before the tactical display. He was not young. Years of command had carved calm into every movement he made. His fleet had defeated pirate kingdoms, machine rebellions, and rival empires. He believed in preparation. He believed in logic. Fear was useful only when controlled. Yet the image before him stole both certainty and breath. Thousands of unidentified contacts. Ancient. Human. His first officer broke the silence. Orders, Commander. Cale did not answer immediately. Instead, he asked a question no one expected. How old is everyone on this bridge? Confused looks spread across the officers. One lieutenant finally answered. Between 30 and 70 cycles, sir. Cale nodded slowly. None of you remember your grandparents' bedtime stories. The bridge became quiet. His communications chief frowned. My grandmother used to mention humans. Cale finally looked at him. So did mine. He drew a slow breath. When I was a child, I thought she was trying to frighten me into behaving. His voice became distant. She never warned me about monsters. She warned me about desperate humans. Someone laughed nervously. Cale did not. My grandmother fought in the border collapse. He looked at the growing swarm of signals. She told me something I never forgot. The bridge waited. Never corner a human with something worth protecting. Silence. I asked why. Cale's expression hardened. She said, He spoke almost in a whisper. Because mercy is the first thing they'll sacrifice. No one spoke again. Orders spread through the Dominion. A defensive fleet, unlike anything assembled in 2 centuries, entered hyperspace. Not to conquer, not to invade, to observe. Officially, unofficially, every admiral understood the truth. They were afraid. Back aboard the ancient human vessel, Commander Cyril followed Mara through corridors that seemed older than memory itself. The walls changed as they descended. The children's drawings disappeared. So did the gardens. The warm lights faded into softer amber. Here the corridors were built from dark metal, engraved with thousands of tiny names. Not decorations. Signatures. Each one represented a keeper. 9 generations. Cyril reached out but stopped himself before touching the wall. They all served here. Mara nodded. They all chose. Even the children. When they became old enough to understand. You never forced anyone. She stopped walking. No. Her answer came instantly. The promise means nothing if it is inherited without choice. Cyril considered that. The weight of those words settled inside him. Duty given by birth was ordinary. Duty chosen again and again across centuries. That was something else. They arrived before a circular chamber, sealed by a single ancient door. No electronic lock. No weapons. Only a carved sentence in faded human handwriting. We remain because someone must. Cyril read it twice. Mara placed her hand against the center of the door. It opened with a quiet sigh. Inside waited darkness. One light slowly awakened. Then another. In the middle of the chamber rested an old recording projector. Not digital. Not holographic. Physical. Protected for generations. Mara looked toward Cyril. My family has guarded this message for nearly 300 years. Who recorded it? My mother. And before her. Her mother. She smiled sadly. The first recording has been copied 9 times. She activated the device. Static filled the room. A woman's face appeared. She wore the same uniform Mara now carried. Different age. Same eyes. Same quiet strength. My name is Captain Alina Voss. Cyril froze. Mara. She nodded. My grandmother. The recording continued. If you are seeing this, the beacon has answered. She paused. That means the galaxy has reached the point we feared. Behind Alina, stars drifted across an observation window. The official histories will tell you humanity vanished. They are wrong. The official histories will tell you we built terrible weapons. They are wrong again. She leaned slightly closer. What we discovered beneath our own solar system. Cyril held his breath. It was never a weapon. The room became perfectly still. It was older than stars. Older than stars. The words echoed inside Cyril's mind. Alina continued. We believed we had discovered an ancient energy source. We were children. What we truly found. Static interrupted the recording. The image flickered. Mara closed her eyes. It always stops there. Why? Damage. Cyril stared at the frozen image. So no one knows. Mara looked toward him. My family knows only what each generation needed. What did they tell you? She answered quietly. That humanity was never guarding itself. Another vibration rolled through the chamber. Stronger this time. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The recording briefly came alive again. Only one sentence survived the interference. If the lock awakens, pray the keepers are still alive. Then the screen went dark forever. Cyril looked at Mara. Neither of them spoke, because both understood the same terrifying truth. The recording had not failed by accident. Someone had wanted history hidden. Outside, throughout the galaxy, thousands of ancient human ships continued waking from their endless silence. Their engines remained cold. Their weapons remained dormant. Yet every civilization could feel them. Waiting, watching, remembering. To be continued in Chapter 2, Part 2, Chapter 2, The Lock Beneath the Stars, Part 2. The silence after the recording felt heavier than any explosion. Commander Cyril remained staring at the dark projector. A single sentence refused to leave his mind. Older than stars. He had spent his entire career believing that civilizations rose, reached greatness, and eventually disappeared. History always moved forward. Now history seemed to be looking back. Another vibration passed through the ancient ship. This time, everyone aboard felt it. Not in the floor. Not in the walls. Inside themselves. Like the universe had taken one slow breath. Across known space, observatories began reporting the same impossible event. The newly awakened human ships were moving. Not quickly. Not aggressively. Each vessel adjusted its position by only a few meters. Then stopped. Thousands of them. Perfectly synchronized. No radio traffic. No visible command. No weapons charging. Yet together they formed something enormous. From above, the pattern resembled threads stretching across the galaxy. No admiral understood what they were seeing. Commander Kale Reyes watched the tactical display update for the fourth time in 3 minutes. The AI failed to identify a threat pattern. Failed again. And again. His chief analyst finally spoke. They aren't surrounding us. They're not surrounding anyone. Kale narrowed his eyes. What are they doing? The analyst enlarged the star map. Lines connected one ancient ship to another. Then another. Until an immense geometric web slowly appeared. No military formation resembled it. No known civilization had ever built anything on such a scale. Kale whispered to himself. That's not a battle formation. His grandmother's voice echoed from memory. Humans never waste effort. If they're moving, they're solving a problem. The bridge fell silent. A transmission officer turned toward him. Commander, the Galactic Council is demanding immediate action. Kale looked at the stars. They're asking the wrong question. What should they ask? He answered without hesitation. They should ask what humanity is trying to protect. Back aboard the ancient colony ship, Mara led Cyril deeper than anyone outside her family had ever gone. The air became cooler. The corridors became older. Some sections no longer looked manufactured. The walls were smooth, dark, almost like polished stone, yet no scanner could identify the material. Ancient lights awakened one by one as they approached. Not because Mara touched anything. Because the ship recognized her. Cyril noticed it immediately. It knows you. She nodded. It always has. How? My family stopped asking that question generations ago. They entered a vast circular chamber. There were no consoles. No engines. No machinery. Only a floor covered with thousands of handprints. Large. Small. Adult. Child. Each preserved beneath crystal. 9 generations. Cyril slowly realized what he was seeing. They all came here. Mara knelt beside one tiny handprint. My daughter made this 3 years ago. She smiled softly. She asked whether the ship would remember her. Does it? Mara looked upward. It remembers everyone. Without warning, the chamber came alive. The crystal beneath every handprint began glowing. Soft blue light spread outward like ripples across still water. One by one, hundreds, thousands, then every handprint shone together. The entire room seemed to breathe. Cyril instinctively stepped backward. What is this? Mara answered quietly. The promise. Throughout the ship, children stopped playing. Garden workers paused. Teachers looked toward the ceiling. No panic spread. Only recognition. They had practiced this moment all their lives. An elderly woman closed the book she had been reading to a group of children. She smiled gently. It's time. The youngest child looked confused. Time for what? She answered with tears quietly forming in her eyes. To keep believing. Far across the galaxy, the awakened fleet completed its movement. 50,000 ancient human ships now rested in absolute stillness. Only then did their hulls begin, emitting faint streams of pale white light. The beams did not travel toward planets. They reached one another, connecting, crossing, expanding. A web of light spread across thousands of light years. Every scientist watching forgot to breathe. No civilization possessed technology capable of such precision. Yet it looked less like engineering, more like memory. Inside the Dominion flagship, alarms suddenly stopped. Every display froze. Every AI shut itself down for exactly 3 seconds. No damage occurred. No attack had been launched. When the systems restarted, one sentence appeared on every screen. Not written. Spoken. Softly. Almost kindly. Please don't be afraid. The message vanished. Bridge officers stared at one another. No one admitted hearing it, because each believed they had imagined it. Cale knew they had not. He had heard it too. Not through speakers. Inside his own mind. On the ancient human vessel, Cyril suddenly placed a hand against his temple. A gentle voice echoed inside him. Not male. Not female. Ancient. Curious. Like someone waking after an endless sleep. Is the sky still beautiful? Cyril froze. It was not a command. Not a warning. A question. The voice carried no hatred. Only wonder. Around him, Mara slowly closed her eyes. You hear it now. What is it? She whispered. I don't know. My grandmother never knew. Neither did hers. The voice spoke again. Have they learned to live together? Children aboard the ship smiled. Some laughed softly. Others looked upward, as though greeting an old friend. No one seemed frightened. They had heard stories about this moment since birth. Suddenly, a new signal entered every communications network in the galaxy. The image resolved slowly. An elderly woman appeared. White hair, weathered face, sharp blue eyes filled with impossible calm. She wore no captain's insignia, only a simple silver emblem shaped like an open circle. Mara stood immediately. Her voice trembled for the first time. Grandmother. Commander Cyril looked at her in astonishment. The recording. This isn't the recording. The woman smiled warmly. My dear Mara, I was beginning to think you'd never need me. Cyril's heart pounded. Eleanor Voss. She nodded. Not entirely. I have been many things. A captain, a mother, a keeper. She looked directly into the camera. And now, the ninth keeper. Her eyes met Cyril's. You've come farther than anyone outside our family. You deserve the truth. She drew one slow breath. The fleet awakening across the galaxy was never built to wage war. Cyril remained silent. Alinar continued. It was built to hold something closed. Every hair on Cyril's arm stood upright. She spoke the words with heartbreaking certainty. The ships are not weapons. They are a lock. The chamber became completely silent. Mara lowered her head. She had known. Not everything, but enough. Cyril whispered. A lock. For what? Alinar looked away for only a moment. When she answered, centuries of sorrow lived inside her voice. We still don't know its name. Another vibration shook the chamber. Stronger. Longer. The lights flickered. For the first time, Alinar looked afraid. It has started waking. Outside, the pale web connecting 50,000 ancient human ships suddenly trembled. Several beams flickered. One vanished. Then another. Across countless star systems, space itself began to ripple like water struck by invisible rain. Astronomers watched stars bend in impossible directions. Gravity changed. Light fractured. Reality itself no longer behaved as it should. Reyes stared through the bridge viewport. A crack of shimmering darkness slowly opened between the stars. His voice barely escaped. We're too late. The gentle voice returned inside every living mind. No longer curious. No longer calm. Only one sentence remained. The door is opening. End of Chapter 2, Chapter 3, The Promise Beyond the Stars, Part 1. The crack between the stars continued to grow. It made no sound. Space simply failed. Commander Reyes had witnessed suns collapse into black holes. He had seen antimatter storms consume entire fleets. He had watched planets tear themselves apart beneath tidal gravity. None of those moments felt like this, because every law of the universe still existed during those disasters. Now, those laws were beginning to disappear. Stars bent where they should have remained fixed. Light traveled in impossible directions. Ships lost their shadows. Time itself seemed uncertain. One officer reached toward a console. His hand appeared to move normally. Its reflection arrived 3 seconds later. The bridge fell into absolute silence. Weapons officers attempted to arm the fleet. Nothing happened. The tactical computer simply displayed one sentence. No physical reference available. Every weapon aboard every known fleet had become meaningless. On the ancient human vessel, the vibration had become constant. Children no longer asked questions. They already knew the stories. Families gathered together beneath the great trees in the central garden. No panic spread. Only quiet embraces. Captain Mara Voss walked slowly through the orchard. Every person she passed smiled. Not because they believed they would survive. Because they knew she had carried the promise farther than anyone before her. A little girl ran toward her. Emma, the same child who had offered Commander Cyril an apple. She held the small wooden toy spaceship with both hands. My grandmother says you'll need this. Mara knelt. Her smile almost broke. I think you should keep it. Emma shook her head. It always finds its way home. Mara accepted the tiny ship with trembling fingers. She closed her hand around it, as if holding an entire lifetime. Thank you. Emma hugged her without another word. Deep beneath the gardens, Commander Cyril stood beside Eleanor Voss. Or rather, the living presence that remained of her. The chamber glowed brighter with every passing second. Thousands of crystal handprints pulsed together like a heartbeat. Cyril looked toward Eleanor. You knew this day would come. She nodded. We prayed it wouldn't. What is opening? Eleanor was quiet for several moments. When humanity explored beneath our own solar system, we believed we had discovered the oldest object in existence. She looked upward. It wasn't an object. It was a doorway. Cyril felt cold. We never opened it. We disturbed its sleep. Another violent tremor shook the chamber. The crystal floor cracked. Not from force. From strain. Eleanor continued. Everything humanity built afterward. The hidden fleets. The disappearing colonies. The erased history. It all served one purpose. Keeping the door closed. Across the galaxy, the 50,000 ancient ships moved for the final time. Each vessel rotated only a few degrees. Their beams of white light aligned perfectly. The immense lattice surrounding known space completed itself. For one beautiful moment, every civilization could see it. A web of light stretching farther than imagination. Not a prison. Not a weapon. A promise. Commander Kale Reyes watched the impossible structure form across the tactical display. His first officer whispered, "They're sacrificing everything." Kale understood immediately. No, they're sacrificing themselves. A transmission request appeared. Origin. Captain Mara Voss. He answered instantly. Her face appeared. She looked older than when they had first met. Only hours had passed. Yet centuries seemed to rest behind her eyes. Neither commander spoke at first. Finally, Kale broke the silence. I came prepared to fight you. I know. I was wrong. She smiled gently. Most people were. Kale lowered his head. My grandmother warned me about humans. What did she say? She said, never corner a human protecting something precious. Myra looked toward the stars beyond her viewport. She was wise. Kale drew one slow breath. What do you need from me? The question surprised everyone on both bridges. Mara answered immediately. Your fleet. My ships won't survive. I know. He hesitated only one heartbeat. They're yours. The officers aboard the Iron Resolve stared at their commander. Kale turned toward them. No one is ordered. If you leave now, you leave with honor. No one moved. The oldest pilot smiled faintly. About time, someone asked. Another officer laughed through tears. I was getting tired of surviving. One by one, every captain acknowledged the order. Not because they served humanity, because they finally understood what humanity had been protecting. Mara closed the channel. Commander Cyril looked at her. You trusted him. I trusted his choice. Outside, the Dominion fleet accelerated. Not toward humanity. Beside them, the first alien warships in history to stand willingly beside human vessels. The lattice expanded. Its damaged section slowly stabilized. For the first time, hope returned. Then, the first human ship died. There was no explosion. Its light simply faded. The beam connecting it to the lattice disappeared. Another ship immediately strengthened its own beam to compensate. Then another died. Then another. Commander Cyril watched names appear across Mara's console. Not hull numbers. Family names. Every vessel carried generations. Every loss represented centuries of memory. No one cried. There was no time. Elena turned toward Mara. Her expression became impossibly gentle. My child, there is one truth your mother could never tell you. Mara already knew. She had always known. Only not completely. Elena stepped closer. You believed you were guarding the lock. She slowly reached out, placing her hand against Mara's cheek. You are the lock. Mara closed her eyes. A single tear escaped. Not from fear. From certainty. Everything suddenly made sense. The generations. The waiting. The promise. The beacon. None of it had been preserving a machine. It had been preserving her bloodline. Each keeper had carried a fragment of the seal. Now only Mara remained. Elena whispered, the final protocol cannot begin until you choose. Mara looked down at the small wooden spaceship still resting in her hand. She smiled through tears. I already did. To be continued in Chapter 3, Part 2, Chapter 3, The Promise Beyond the Stars, Part 2. Mara closed her fingers around the little wooden spaceship. The edges had been worn smooth by generations of tiny hands. Someone had carved it centuries ago. Someone who believed children deserved to dream, even while carrying the weight of a galaxy. She looked at it for one long moment. Then she smiled. Not because she was unafraid. Because fear no longer mattered. Commander Cyril watched her in silence. Every instinct told him to stop her. Every lesson he had learned since boarding the ancient ship told him she would never allow it. You knew, he said quietly. Mara nodded. I suspected. When my mother died, she looked relieved. I never understood why. Elena's image shimmered beside them. She wasn't relieved because her burden had ended. She was relieved because yours had finally begun. No one spoke. Outside the chamber, another human ship faded from existence. Its beam vanished. The lattice trembled. Immediately, 3 Dominion cruisers shifted position, extending their own energy fields to reinforce the gap. Commander Kale Reyes had made his choice. His fleet no longer fought for an empire. It fought for tomorrow. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, alarms continued to echo. Not from enemy weapons. From reality itself. Space around the fleet rippled like the surface of a disturbed lake. One destroyer disappeared for half a second. When it returned, every clock aboard reported a different time. Another cruiser found itself drifting backward despite engines at full thrust. Physics had become uncertain. Kale gripped the command rail. Status. His chief engineer answered without looking up. We've lost targeting. We've lost navigation. We've lost predictive systems. What still works? The engineer looked around the bridge. He managed a tired smile. The crew. Kale nodded. That's enough. He opened a fleet-wide channel. This is Commander Kale Reyes. No computers. No battle network. Fly by sight. Trust the captains beside you. If a human ship goes dark, you take its place. One by one, acknowledgments filled the channel. No speeches. No hesitation. Only duty. The crack between the stars widened. Something moved beyond it. Not a ship. Not a creature. A shadow so immense that distance lost its meaning. No eye could focus on its shape. Every mind that looked directly at it remembered something different. Some saw endless darkness. Others saw oceans. Some saw childhood nightmares. Commander Cyril felt only one thing. Loneliness. older than time itself. The gentle voice returned. Not inside one mind. Inside every living mind. It sounded weaker now. Sadder. I did not mean to wake. Mara looked toward the growing fracture. I know. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You've been asleep a very long time. The presence answered. Your people stayed. Mara smiled through tears. We promised. There was no reply. Only silence. Then the lattice shuddered violently. 3 more human ships dissolved into light. Elena turned to Mara. It's time. Mara looked toward Cyril. Then toward the gardens above. She could almost hear children laughing beneath the trees. She placed the wooden toy spaceship into Cyril's hands. If Earth still remembers how to build gardens, give this to the first child born there. Cyril swallowed hard. I can't. You can. I was never meant to carry your promise. Mara gently closed his fingers around the toy. No, but you can carry our story. For the first time in decades, Commander Cyril cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quiet tears. The kind that arrive only when words are no longer enough. Mara climbed the final steps toward the center of the chamber. The crystal floor responded beneath her feet. Every handprint glowed. 9 generations. 9 lifetimes. 9 promises. Elena stood beside her one last time. I am proud of you. Mara laughed softly. You've never actually said that before. I know. I should have. She embraced her granddaughter. For a brief moment, centuries disappeared. They were no longer keepers. Only family. When they stepped apart, Elena's image had already begun to fade. My time ended long ago. Yours ends now. But because of you. She looked toward the stars. Everyone else's does not. Outside, Kale watched the lattice collapse section by section. We're losing them. His first officer whispered. Commander. If the center fails. Kale nodded. I know. Without another word, he ordered his flagship forward. Straight toward the weakest point in the lattice. Other alien fleets followed. Not because anyone commanded them. Because someone had to stand there. Human. Alien. It no longer mattered. Mara reached the center of the chamber. The light surrounded her. Warm. Gentle. She looked once toward Cyril. Then upward, as though she could somehow see Emma and the children waiting beneath the trees. She whispered their names. One by one. Every child. Every family. Every keeper who had come before. Then she spoke her final words. Some dreams exist so others can keep living. She closed her eyes. The light embraced her. There was no scream. No explosion. Only a pulse. Soft. Brilliant. The wave spread outward through the ancient ship. Then into the lattice. Then across the galaxy. Every remaining human vessel shone like a new star. The fractures in space slowed. The impossible crack began closing. The vast shadow beyond the doorway faded without anger. Without resistance. As if accepting the promise that had finally been fulfilled. One last whisper echoed through every living heart. Thank you. Then, silence. The doorway was gone. Weeks later, the old colony ship drifted quietly beside a blue world. Earth. Children crowded against the observation windows. Many had never believed the stories completely. Now the stories filled the sky. Emma stepped carefully onto green grass. She removed her shoes. placed one foot against the ground, then the other. Her eyes grew wide. It feels soft. Behind her, fathers and mothers laughed through tears. Some knelt to touch the soil. Others simply stood beneath the wind, unable to believe air could smell this alive. Commander Cyril watched from a distance. The wooden toy spaceship rested safely in his pocket. A newborn cried nearby. He smiled. Soon. Several days later, Commander Reyes visited a quiet hillside overlooking the restored gardens. No cameras followed him. No honor guard. Only silence. A simple stone stood beneath a young tree. Captain Mara Voss, keeper of the promise. Nothing more. Kale removed the insignia from his uniform. He placed it gently against the stone. He stood there for a long time, then turned and walked away without a single word. As the sun began to set, Commander Cyril remained alone beside the grave. A young cadet approached carefully. Commander. Cyril looked up. The cadet hesitated. Why did humans stay? Cyril looked across the fields, where children were running through tall grass for the very first time. He smiled, then answered with the quiet certainty of someone who had finally understood. They stayed because someone had to. End of chapter 3.